Thanks, Meredith. Hi, everybody. This is our November EDAP meeting. It's great to see everybody in person again. Last year, we decided to do 2 of these in person, and I think we should pick 2 dates next year as well, because it really is nice. For those watching, we do have some good food here because, number 1, we're in person, and number 2, this unfortunately for us is Aaron Norris's last meeting. So we'll talk more about that later. First item is the approval of minutes. Somebody want to make a motion to approve those, or does anybody have any other comments? I think a number of people said.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
and do we need to go around and talk and name everybody when we vote in person? We didn't used to have to do that.
Oh.
Does anybody know? Why don't I do it just in case? Mark,
Yes.
Ken,
Abstain.
George,
Yes.
Lily,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
I vote yes. Tom,
Yes.
Derek,
Aye.
Zaina,
Yes.
Alan.
Staying.
Okay, thank you. Okay, staff updates, Meredith.
Good to see everyone in real life. So to sweeten Aaron's bittersweet departure, Anne and Lily have brought some sweet treats. Zach, as you know, left last month. He got a job as a housing developer in New York City. He's close to friends and family, very similar to Aaron. One of our assistant town administrators also recently left town hall and returned home. So there's a trend, there's something happening. There's a gravitational pull of homes, poaching people from town hall. So we'll be down 2 staff people or a division of 4. So it will certainly be challenging. We posted the economic development planner position and the senior economic development planner position. We have already gotten several applications. Anne has already made some suggestions in terms of outreach and promoting the position. So we'll keep you posted on our hiring progress. But I think the expectation is that through the calendar year, the division is going to be pretty lean. So we're going to be trying to put some things in hold and push things to the back burner and prioritize. And the top priorities are Chestnut Hill and making sure that our first phase of work with the Center Street lots is rounded out.
Can you send every, oh, go on, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, can you send the job posting so that we can send it around to people?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I have some friends who used to work for the federal government locally, and they know a lot of younger people who used to work for the federal government, some of whom I think are probably well qualified for this job. So trying to get that out, and there are other, just send it out to whoever.
Just gonna ask, what's the goal for having a person start like January 1, turn of the year?
I would say I probably have to wait to get on the other side of the holidays.
Yeah.
So in January or February. And I will say that, it's certainly a challenging position just given the scope of everything that we're working on. But it does seem like for the projects that and transitioning to other staff members, we're sort of at good transition points, both for the Center Street lots work. And then, Aaron, we know that the Brookline Art Makes Community Public Art Initiative was Aaron's baby. He had real ownership of that project, and it's almost complete with the exception of a couple of projects that Aaron already has teed up and ready to go. So we just need to follow through with the plans that Aaron has already laid. And then the pop-up program that we're running, we're transitioning, planning on phasing out that initiative, which is one of our fun projects. And then I think hoping that Anne might be able to help with some of the business communities, keeping the lines of communication open over the next couple of months.
So we'll see how it goes. Anything else? Okay, Brookline Village and Washington Square parking studies.
So the surveys are closing, I believe it's next week, and we had received over 500 survey responses for each of the different parking areas, since we have 2 separate surveys going. It was kind of a joke with the consultants and us that it's kind of neck and neck, so we'll see who comes out on top, whether it's more Washington Square, Brookline Village, but has been very, very great, good feedback, very similar to what we saw with the Coolidge Corner area stuff, so very similar feedback in that regard. We did just do a pop-up for Brookline Village last week, and it was pretty well attended. Washington Square, we had done the week of the 13th for Indigenous Peoples Week, and that was we only had about 6 to 10 people that stopped by to talk with us. There were people that hadn't done the survey or hadn't come to any of the other public meetings, so it was good to get another section of people's feedback that we wouldn't have otherwise had. Brookline Village, we had a couple of people that were prior town staffers, some town meeting members, and then just some passerby that were intrigued as to what we were doing. And we were offering some Halloween candy, so I thought a few people to walk up and engage, because there's also free candy. And then we are starting to do outreach for the focus groups. So just like Coolidge Corner, we'll be doing the resident, business, and staff focus groups for each of the commercial areas. So those will be happening hopefully before town meeting, assuming we can get that on the books. Otherwise, it'll be beginning of December or so, once town meeting and Thanksgiving are all said and done. But so far we've gotten some good schedule openings for people, so it's looking promising to get done sooner rather than later. But otherwise, the initial recommendation should be coming out by the end of the year, and then the final report will be sometime in the spring, by May at the latest, the initial time.
And can you remind us? The Washington Street work is waiting for the results of this.
So, it's honestly waiting for it, but it is still in the process of being reviewed by Mass DOT, so timing will be good in terms of when we'll hear back from Mass DOT, and Select Board will be able to receive those results as well as the parking study results. So it's a very well-aligned timeframe, but there will be another review happening with the proposed complete streets plans leading up to the 75% design, because they just completed the 25%. So yes, it is potentially being waited for, but also it's aligning with the time frame for receiving Mass DOT's feedback as well.
Okay.
You get a sense for that respondents are aware of the proposed changes to on-street parking associated with the Washington Street.
Some people weren't aware, but we did let them know where the website was and where to find those things. Some people were asking about how to provide their own feedback as to the process, and I gave them the website, which then has the transportation staff's email as well, acknowledging the fact that based off of the conversations when the 25% design was before Select Board, that while the feedback is still welcome, depending on what Mass DOT's changes are, if they agree with a lot of what transportation's already proposed, there may not be as much public feedback impact as if there were changes coming back from Mass DOT. So some were very intrigued, some approached us because of that project, others just wanted to know why these things were happening, what was going on. We talked about the bridle path, complete streets, and just general parking and Center Street lots, of course, it's been a big one as well, and separate commercial area, but it was a big conversation starter for why are all these parking things happening now? So good conversation.
Do you intend to reach out to the fire department, police department? And those are the two of the biggest impacted groups.
Yes, both of them are on our staff contact list for the focus groups.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to ask one quick question. Does anybody else want more ice cream? Otherwise, I'm gonna put it in the freezer.
The awesome power of the tree.
Make sure that makes it into the meeting minutes.
Ice cream is melting quickly.
It's the responsible move.
It is.
I'm going to put my hand up if I can.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, I'm sorry. I had hoped to be in person with you, but did not work with the kids tonight. I wanted to circle back to just the last comment about the fire department and the police department and their involvement in the parking studies. So I just want to be really clear about what the select board approved. The select board approve the 25% design for the Washington Street Complete Streets project contingent upon the initiation of these two parking studies. These two parking studies are not transportation studies, which wouldn't affect police and fire unless the fire department wants to pull up in front of a restaurant and running to get lunch. These are parking studies. So we're looking forward to getting the feedback from that. My understanding is, as part of that requirement for the two parking studies, there would be two advisory groups made up of both businesses and abutting residents that would be advising town staff on the input that's received from the parking study to help make policy recommendations about parking. So it's not this idea that police and fire is going to have an influence in the parking study. I don't think that's within scope.
I think it's fair to say they're users of, the staff there are users of parking spaces up and down Washington Street.
Yeah, but again, if they're involved in the parking piece, but it's not related to using it as a corridor for, fire trucks. Right? So anyway, that's the scope of it. Anybody can participate, but I just want to make it clear that that's what's happening.
Yeah, it was just noted in the Transportation Board presentations that a number of the spaces in just over here near the police department are used by police personnel.
Across from town hall, yeah.
Right.
Could I ask, did you get feedback? It's a related topic, and I'm sort of sliding it over, but have they commented on service times? Because that's been an issue associated with parking, adding parking lanes, because you lose areas for vehicles to pull over in the event of emergency vehicle movement through the corridor.
Yeah, that did not come up as an item that was commented on by the police and fire during our public hearings and deliberations on the 25% design.
I sent the police chief and the fire chief a question about if they were aware of it and if they had an opinion on it, and I didn't get a response. Whatever that's worth. There are studies.
It'd be hard to believe that they weren't aware of it. So,
no, I asked them. I didn't say they weren't. I asked them if they were, and if they had an opinion on it. And because there have been studies coming out of Washington D.C. and other places where, it's just kind of common sense. You lose areas for vehicles to pull over when a fire truck or a police vehicle's flashing their lights behind you, and that could impact service times.
Yeah, I don't recall them coming and commenting at all. So,
thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else about the parking studies? Any other questions? Article 8. Who's going to talk about that?
I'll take that as well. So the conversation is still ongoing. There is no brand new draft of the warrant article at this point to date. It is on the select board and advisory committee agendas for tomorrow evening. Advisory board is taking it up at 7 p.m. Traditionally, select board's been hearing the warrant articles later in the evening. So the guess is that it would be post advisory committee meeting, depending. Of course, it depends on how long the rest of the agenda takes. And Paul, correct me if I'm wrong on that. However, planning board has done a few amendments to the warrant article, and the land use subcommittee for the advisory has been meeting, and of course EDAB and SBDC both voted to request that they remove the commercial areas. It does seem with all these conversations that is going to be the case, that they're going to focus on the residential areas rather than the commercial areas moving forward with this. But there is no official draft removing that. But the planning board at their most recent meeting had a 3-3 split. So they didn't take an official vote on it yet, but they are continuing that discussion. But as of now, there are revisions saying that those commercial areas will be taken out, but not necessarily specifying all of the zones that we had mentioned during our motions. But that's not necessarily not going to happen. It just hasn't happened yet.
So there were 3-3 on the draft that you sent for 10/21,
Yeah.
because the question I had about that, and I can't open it out here, is that it says, sorry, it's a little hard to read on my phone. This section applies to outdoor lighting in areas where solely residential uses are, except for the following, and there's a whole long list of the following, including still has holiday lights going off at 10 PM and some other things like that that don't make sense, but it seems to me that it's a little general, where solely residential uses are except for the following. It doesn't say we're excluding the commercial areas, and I'm just wondering whether there was any conversation about that.
There is still conversation, it's just not in any of the written documents at this point, aside from just calling out the residential area specifically. They're not specifically listing out the commercial areas being excluded, but it has been part of the meeting conversation. So I know it's ongoing in terms of, I think all the different committees are kind of waiting on the others to help guide the language and conversation. So with some of them having overlapping meeting times, it's been a little bit of back and forth, but the based off of the conversations I had with the staff of the committees and then the listening to the committee meetings and things, it does appear that they will be removing commercial from it entirely, but right now the language that's written doesn't reflect that yet.
Does anybody want to send another, what does anybody here think we should do, if anything, about where we are? I don't know if people read the attachment to the agenda with what's still a draft, I gather, from the planning board.
So I guess, why hasn't the language been updated to include the exclusion of commercial to date? It sounds like there's been chatter about it, but no one's.
I think it's just because the meetings keep being continued, so they're just waiting to put together another draft, because I think they're on their fourth variation since our initial preliminary draft that we had reviewed. So I think right now they're just trying to gather all the intel before they officially make those choices. And I believe there's the subcommittee for the advisory is also drafting another amendment as well. So they're just trying to gather all the information first before they make the official draft changes.
And I did listen to the select board meeting last week when they were talking about it, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that one of the proponents said that they were definitive that they're excluding the commercial areas. I don't know that they define those, but I thought they said that.
Well, they did mention it, and there was some pushback from at least one board member about that. I know that because it was me.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure if it's actually is it on our agenda for tomorrow night? I thought it was.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I do want to say about the commercial area, and I know that there's been quite a bit of discussion about this. And everything I've read, thank you for the attachments. I did read the planning board's lengthy commentary on this article and suggested amendments, some of which I'd like to hear from the moderator about whether they're in scope or not. I think they wanted to add a section to the article, which to me would seem like an expansion, but we need to hear from the moderator. But all the commentaries have been about the business districts, the front of the business districts, the business side of the business districts. And what the petitioners seem to be agreeing to, and other boards, including this one, I believe, are missing, is that every business has a back of a business, and this is where the residential properties abut the business districts. It's not the units that are above Dunkin' Donuts. It's the properties residential properties that are abutting the back of the business districts. And this is where the intense lighting is. And so I was a little concerned that we're having multiple tiers for residential. If you happen to live near a commercial district and you're behind it, you're almost a second-class citizen with respect to this article and being promised something in the future. So that's one of the issues that I have. I think there's a number of other issues with the article that may or may not get worked out. But I would like to see something done about the commercial areas. I don't understand where that's gonna sit. Is that gonna sit in zoning? In the residential districts that abut them are just, are out of luck. They have no path to resolution. So that's a concern I have about it. And I've heard others, but I know they're
One
working.
conversation I had with somebody a couple of days ago, in terms of the rear. Their insurance company, I mean, everybody needs to sit down and figure out who requires what, and that hasn't happened because I've been told that insurance companies require certain things for the restaurants in particular, but other businesses as well, but you know, and nobody knows that except if you happen to hear it in casual conversation. So I think that getting a group of people who run businesses in town and some of the proponents and other people who know about this stuff would be very helpful before anything's passed. And does anybody, I see you, Janice, but let me just see if anybody else in EDAP has any thoughts and whether anybody thinks we should send another letter or do anything.
Wasn't there a lot of questions still about how the lighting would be measured and how the ordinance would be enforced?
I think we're past the futility of enforcement on light levels at this point. So I think we're good in that regard.
Yeah, and some of the timing, although this still talks about holiday lights have to go out at 10 p.m., which is an issue for restaurants and others that are open long after that. Janice?
Yes, sorry, your chat is disabled, so I couldn't put this information in, but the advisory committee, well, first of all, Janice Kahn, town meeting member precinct 15 and on advisory. So I just want to clarify that the advisory committee will be discussing this on Thursday, not tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is warrant article 7. So a different article. And just to clarify, I have been following it. My husband is one of the co-petitioners. The commercial areas are not included in the current version. And there are measurements that have been added by the petitioners. And as was pointed out, it is still being discussed and is still, not in final form yet. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you know if commercial areas are defined now in whatever is being drafted? It suggested that it be zoning areas. And then Harvard Street. I don't know if it's better defined now.
Yeah, so Harvard Street is not included. It has its own zoning.
Yeah,
It is zoned, actually. This
Yeah.
is a general bylaw. And it's for the residential areas.
okay. Any other comments from EDAP? Or, yeah,
Well, just, our last letter, if I recall, basically said, if commercial areas come out of this, then, whatever members' individual views, the board is agnostic. If commercial members stay in, we didn't, I don't think we specifically said, we'd be opposed. Maybe we did. It was a whole meeting ago. But I mean, given where it stands right now, I don't think anything's happened that would definitively change that position.
I think that's right. I don't know, just everybody's shaking their head.
I guess my question is just about timing, since town meeting is, right upon us. So currently, are we looking at it currently as written or as most recently rewritten? And if we do provide feedback, is that kind of what we want to say? As currently written, we don't support this because we actually haven't seen a version with the commercial districts taken out. I'm just thinking about, again, the timing piece of we're not meeting again before timing. It's
No.
2 weeks, and it just doesn't seem like this is ready for prime time yet, based on what our board deals with in relation. So,
The problem is it's not written yet.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think
So there's nothing to vote on.
so that's what I'm saying. I think there's nothing to vote on. And I think, if asked for an opinion, if that's our opinion, there's nothing to vote on because you
Okay.
haven't rewritten our
Right.
pieces we've asked for.
All right, well, we said what we meant in the letter that we sent, so I think that could stand on its own. Okay. Anything else? So keep us posted, please, yes, yes. Okay. So I think this is you too, Jessica. The Warren article, the business impact rubric.
So the rubric is ready to go, and with Tiffany Oliva having left us, it is still in the works of getting it out. Just explore with town meeting being so close. It's on the lower levels of priority, and like it of course is important, but you know what I mean. Town meeting being two weeks away and this not being for this town meeting, it'll likely be something that we talk more with the sixth floor about post town meeting time, but they are aware of the rubric now. And that will be hopefully included for spring town meeting, but I will keep you guys apprised as to what happens next.
Great. Thank you. Bridal path, is that you?
That is me. We had a very active October. So the design review committee met for a kickoff October 9th and had a presentation of the project history from Tool and some of the beginning conceptual drawings. So those are all available online if anyone's interested, and we'll get linked with the packet. So for anyone who has not been paying attention to the Bridal Path project, it's a 2.25 mile shared median path for shared use. So it's looking at walking, biking, and rolling. And it's in that piece that would be with the tree canopy, the parking, and the sea line. So the DRC is just working on advancing feasibility to the 25% design phase. And this last month we did talk and walk events. So there were 3, one at St. Mary's, one in Coolidge Corner, and one in Washington Square. I was able to attend St. Mary's in Washington Square, and both have actually pretty large audiences for the fact that they were at 5 o'clock. And we were able to actually go, they laid out cones to show a demonstration of how far out that they would need to do the land taking of where the parking lane is. And it was really interesting, and DPW actually even took the cones to show how wide it would go and then parked cars next to it to show how much space that there was there to actually save the parking that people were concerned about. They're actually looking at some styles of parking that you can see in Somerville, which are they're backwards, like think about angled parking, but backwards. So it's like back in angled parking, which is apparently like the first position of parallel parking is the way to think about it. And it actually
go past the space.
you go past and then you back up, and it actually makes it safer when you're on your way out, so you don't have to back into traffic.
Is there
So
a dedicated drive lane that you would provide for that sort of backing?
Because you're backing into traffic.
yeah, that's the thing.
How does that
Well,
work?
so it's just like your parallel parking, so you'd go past and then back. But that's
That's.
kind of the opposite. Yeah, it's kind of weird, but apparently it works and they have it in Somerville. So they're looking at a couple different. Different things.
It's an endorsement. thing.
Yeah. They have it in Somerville. They're trying it out.
It's all the rage, yeah.
Yeah. I've never
Trying
tried
it
it.
in Brooklyn now.
Very hip, very underground.
Yeah.
Not sure you've heard of it. It's what all the kids are doing these days. But so they're looking at some alternatives to make sure that they're keeping parking intact. So I think they did hear that as a piece of feedback. So they were able to do again these presentations with Tool staff, and then they did really interactive stations talking about the different aspects of the projects. And there were a lot of different opportunities for public engagement pieces. So that I thought it was really great. I think a lot of the biggest concerns were around trees, parking, the practical use of having a path for all of these different activity groups happening on top of them, and impact on current bike lanes. There was a concern that if they are building bike lanes in the middle, that they're going to take away bike lanes from the side. So they're still kind of working all that out. So there will be continued opportunities for feedback throughout the entire process, and the DRC is going to start meeting monthly in January, which will all again be public meetings on top of community meetings. One note that I shared with the Tool team was that I thought it would be worthwhile to look at placemaking while we're looking at this project. I think particularly thinking about the commercial centers that this is supposed to be going through. So I had recommended the inclusion of space for additional bike parking lots, which is something that we really lack in Brookline and commercial districts. So if anyone here bikes, it's really hard to find a place to park your bike when you're going to a business. So you can imagine that, you know, you have your family and your young kids out going for a nice weekend bike ride, then you're able to kind of have a space to park 3 bikes and then go to the Brooksmith. So I think there's a lot of ways to look at it as an opportunity, not necessarily just as a transit corridor, but as a tourism and a placemaking piece for Brookline. As that was just a piece of feedback that I heard that bikers were having issues with that. But there is an email now available, bridalpath@brookline.gov. So if anyone has any other feedback, and it's a long process. They always say, you know, working at MassDOT, they say 25% is the first 90% of a project. So I'm sure that there will be lots of spaces for input, but it was great to see we did actually have pretty packed rooms each night.
Is this effort being funded by the town exclusively?
So it is being funded by a federal earmark that was got by Congressman Oxenboss.
And that earmark takes us through what level of design?
I think it's definitely 25% design, but I think that might be almost all the way through.
Through design, but not for construction.
No.
And is anyone,
Not at all.
is anyone discussing the disruption on businesses during construction? I mean, this is a big scale project.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be, I think first and foremost, we have to just decide if we want to do the project.
Right.
I think it's kind of an interesting piece of feedback that was kind of being discussed at these meetings of like, not quite understanding the use of it. If it's not just for bikers and bikers then have to navigate people walking their dogs. Like, you know, how practical is it to have a shared use path down the middle? And also if you're making it for walkers, why aren't they just using the crosswalk? So there was like, or not the crosswalk, the sidewalk. So I think that there's still some conversation around the practicality of the project. And just sort of, again, like really being thoughtful about if this makes sense at this time.
What's the budget? Construction budget?
They haven't put forward construction yet.
They're already up to the park, or no?
A lot, comfortably a lot, and it's gonna be a tip project, like eventually, that was the,
What is the tip?
on like MassDOT's tip, the transportation improvement program.
And that's state funded?
That will eventually be state, it'll need to probably be a combination of state and federal funds. So like, we'll get it through design, then it will go through the MPOs, the planning organizations for the state. It's a really long process, this is not gonna be built next week.
And I don't think you and I are gonna live to see it.
No, I honestly am not
There
sure.
are a lot of
why.
things that
I might-
happening now.
I might not be living to see the project, but.
So, is any of this on T-land?
So they. Like when they're doing all of like the right of way and stuff like that, it shouldn't be on any of the T land, it's the part on the side. But there's also like a weird switch if you think about where the T is when it goes into Washington Square. So there's like a lot of different pieces that need to go into this.
And I presume the accessibility project that.
Yes, they're doing
is
it-
Integrated.
Yes, they are doing it, and I think it seems like Tool is working very closely with the town and the transportation department and the MBTA to make sure this is all happening in an integrated way.
One of the things I was talking with somebody about this in the last couple of days. We actually had a briefing. I'm totally blanking on the name of the guy whose idea it was
Tool something, I forget what his last
Yeah.
name is.
years ago,
Yeah.
well before COVID. And they were working on this idea about the bridle path along the T, and that was before at least any of us or I had the clue that the T was coming through to do this major construction project. So there is
Yeah,
a
and my
lot of
understanding,
things that seemed reasonable before we knew about the T project don't seem very reasonable anymore.
yeah, so my understanding is that originally, and again, I'm sure there's a lot of folks that, I know that Paul Warren was also there at the meetings too, so if you want to jump in at all, anytime, Paul. But my understanding was that Rep. Patolo initially got an earmark for a smaller study, and then that has now opened it up for this larger federal earmark. So it's been in process for quite a bit, than this idea, but this is now where they actually have to like figure out how it will work, and I think it didn't seem like there was too much concern about the MBTA. Like the processes overlapping, it does seem like there's very good communication happening. Cause I know particularly like the Green Space Alliance was very present there, and they were really concerned about some of the, you know, historic tree canopy. But it seems like a lot of it is where you think about those large chunks of parking where on the median. So it's kind of interesting, but again, like it does seem like that they're not gonna have to take like as many trees. Like if you go on the website, you can see like Tool has put together some diagrams of like where they think they would take this or that. So there are some pretty decent preliminary drawings, but again, they're very preliminary and nothing that has been agreed on. So I think right now we're like, this is like the kickoff, like we're just starting really digging into this and getting feedback. And like I said, I think at every single meeting, I was able to talk to a different person that brought something that I was like, that people were like, oh, we didn't think about that. So I think it's gonna be a very long process with a lot of public input.
Isn't the general concept that they're using these back-in angled spaces to allow them to eliminate that area that the cars back out into that's not in the street, and then
Yeah.
that becomes the bridle path?
Yeah.
Just as a concept, it's not always that way.
Yeah, and that's kind of the tricky thing, because for a lot of
Yeah.
spaces, that is where they're taking it, but then there's some places, especially when it's coming in through commercial districts, where it gets like a little bit funky. So I'm interested to see again, like how they're planning to design around some of that. And again, I think one of the bigger issues is that Beacon Street from St. Mary's through Washington Square, the outbound side of Beacon Street is the wider side, so that would have the bridle path. But then once you get to Washington Square, it needs to switch over.
Yeah.
Or the opposite way. One of the ways that I'm just trying to think which way the road's going, but that's where it switches, so there also that needs to be kind of a big shift around, so.
It's on the south side, closest St. Mary's to Washington.
Yes, so it's not like gonna end up being a straight line, it's gonna kind of end up being a little back and forth, so I think that's where some of the conversation I think will be about, the practicality of and making sure that it makes sense for the town.
Really, it sounds like a really labor intensive project, and I was just kind of going to Mark's comment about cost. We might as well learn how much these things cost. Because we're gonna come back to these ideas of how do we manage pedestrian, bike traffic, cars, and something has to give, and I think that number is gonna be shocking to all of us.
Oh, yeah.
But I would love to know what that, like, I'd love for part of the funding that you have secured to be cost estimate.
It will be cost estimated.
Yeah.
I think at this point, because they're just doing the very preliminary designs, part of this will include a full cost estimation.
And then on TIF, I have some experience with TIF, tax increment financing, and that typically means that when a new development comes into play, that triggers payment. So I'm not seeing a lot of new development along Beacon Street with the zoning that we have, so I'm just confused about the financing a little bit behind it, because, yeah, so that's typically how TIF has worked in my experience. It's still paid for through property taxes.
Oh, I said tip.
TIF, oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, TIF.
No, it's all, there's too many acronyms for every single
Yeah.
thing, so it's usually a combination of federal funds and
Okay.
local funds.
When is the next like go, no go vote on this, whether it actually ever comes to fruition or not?
So we would have to get fully through the 25% design phase, and then it will, like, those designs will then go to the select board.
And at that point, the select board says, with the money, time and effort, we're done, or how does that?
I
Yeah, so
have to call
I-
them like you did that.
What do you really think, Mark? Prejudging the.
Boy, I showed up at the right meeting. So I do just take a step back for a minute. So and as I had to throw the team, I think, a lifeline for at St. Mary's for the first design meeting with the public. We have to remember where we're at, right? The select board signed a contract for a design, and I honestly can't remember if it was 25% or 75%, but call it the design, which is going to help us with feasibility and costs. Now, it's important to note that the accessibility project for the MBTA did come after, the initial vision of this project. So it does have implications for this project in totality, and could impact parking and tree canopy. So, all of this is going to have to go through almost the same process that you saw for the MBTA, right? It's going to need to go to Transportation Board, because Transportation Board, we're going to affect parking and the use of the public way. That's the purview responsibility for the Transportation Board. If we get into any additional tree issues, it's going to have to go before the tree committee, because they're public shade trees. And of course, the select board is going to have to approve the next step, which would be additional design and/or contracting for engineering services. So there's a long path, there's a long road ahead for this project, and we have to go through some gates. And honestly, I can't sit here and tell you exactly that I know exactly where all the funding is to paint the stripes and everything else. So that's money we're going to have to pursue. The first step is to find about what is it going to cost, and is it feasible. So that's what we're spending money on now.
So just to clarify,
according to Tool's presentation from the 14th walk and talk, it's 75% design.
That's what
And
we funded. Okay.
cost estimates. Wow, that's a huge commitment to get to a decision point.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but I think there must be a gate in there where they have to come back to us at 25. I mean, I'd have to go look back at the contract, but typically there's an initial 25% they come to you and then we approve to go forward. So, and if that's not the case, that can become the case. Because I do know that that the work that we've done on the select board and everybody else for the accessibility project for the MBTA, we only did 2 stations. We still have the rest of the corridor to go. And there's a lot of implications on that work. So these 2 things do need to come together. They're being done at the right time, frankly, so that we will know what the outcome is. But yeah, 75% seems like a lot of ground to cover before you get a check. So hopefully there'll be a check.
And also it's gonna have to go back to the MassDOT process a few different times too, so to approve the 25% design.
Yeah.
So again, it's not getting built next week by any concept of the imagination.
So,
But-
I was a little confused. The original schematics that I saw, this project showed it as a bike lane exclusively. And it sounds like if you try to squeeze in a pedestrian lane, you're gonna have an inferior pedestrian and an inferior bike lane, and it just seems like, I'm not even sure who the constituency would be for the pedestrian, adding pedestrian to that.
Yeah, I think that was some of the feedback that was heard, was kind of this idea of, are we building an inferior bike lane and then taking away bike lanes, or, I think the biggest thing was also dog walkers. They were really concerned about dog walkers because apparently that's like one of the hardest things for bikes to get around with dogs on leashes. So there was, I think a lot of folks that had raised that concept of like,
That would be a good political fight, the dog.
the dog walkers versus the bike
Dogs and
lanes.
bikes.
Wow, yeah.
Good luck with that.
So I think all this to say is that it's in very early stages.
DoorDash guys.
And there are no commitments being made by anyone. It's very much a exploratory kind of committee at looking at what this design phasing could look like.
And the select board believes this is a good use of public dollars?
They're federal dollars, so they were.
They're-
Is that a rhetorical question?
No, it's a true
I mean,
question. I think this
we-
is so high in
we
the sky that
The
It's-
select board approved the project for the design. So that would tell you the answer. The current select board did.
yeah,
We'll look at
okay.
in the future. We can't commit a future select board. Future select board may decide that after they see the final design and the impacts on whatever, maybe they'll choose not to fund it.
Speaking of high.
Yeah, people should help themselves. Sean?
Well, just to add very briefly, 2 important things to bear in mind. Sean Lynn Jones, town meeting member, precinct 1, president of the Brookline Green Space Alliance. And I actually went on the tree planting committee's site visit to the MBTA stations affected by the accessibility project. We're looking at very different timeframes for these 2 projects. If the MBTA gets its act together and moves forward quickly, and it says it wants to, they will, wrap up their work in a year or 2. If we proceed the way we're proceeding with the bridle path, we're probably talking about a project that might be finished in a decade. And the whole point of the design review, largely funded with the federal earmark, is to get to that 75% design to submit the proposal to the state's transportation improvement program. And of course, that submission would have to be approved by the select board. We're on the list for that program, but that doesn't mean we would get funding anytime soon, if ever. It's a competitive process. We did it for the Carlton Street footbridge. As you may remember, that took a long time too to work its way through, but eventually was supported by the same TIP state funding process. The good news is, it looks like the accessibility project that the MBTA is doing, although details need to be worked out, and the bridle path probably are compatible. They've made some decisions that would open up, the space and not put transformers on the path for the bridle path. But as some of you have mentioned, the huge issues now are, is this really multimodal, the bridle path? Can pedestrians and cyclists be accommodated? How would that work? And then beyond that, there are a whole range of design issues that get much more specific. But they're coming up, and that's why we have this design review committee to try to work this out. But I hope that clarifies some things. But even though we're talking about these things at the same time, these two projects, they're going to happen on a very different schedule.
Thank you. Anything else on this? I guess there's, more to come. More to come. Okay, Al, comprehensive plan?
Yes, I will defer to the chairman if you'd like. Paul, comp plan update?
Yep, Al, I read your, from the meeting minutes, for last meeting, I think it was September. The only thing that's changed, what Al had said was, we're moving towards, the next phase of public engagement for, in-person workshops, which will happen in multiple locations, North and South Brookline, an online, survey as well for feedback, and then small group discussions. We have this concept of meeting in a box, so that we can get smaller groups and reach out. We're really working hard to get to folks that typically wouldn't engage in processes like these. We did bounce up against town meeting with respect to getting the engagement materials done. So it's gonna be pushed towards the end of the year, probably right after the first of the year, to start do the next piece of engagement work. And with that feedback, we will start working on drafting the report and getting feedback from the various boards and commissions that we want to get feedback on. We did come up, the challenge or the discussion that we've had a lot, I would agree with this, is the level of specificity that we're trying to get to feedback from the public. We have broken the town into 5 zones. And each one of those zones is a contiguous area that is somewhat related. It can be diverse with respect to structure and uses. And we're going to invite the public to help us prioritize things like housing and green space and transportation and multimodal, et cetera, so that we can then start crafting recommendations based on the feedback from the public. So we're still marching. I wish it was going a little bit faster, but I'd rather go a little slower and get it right than to rush the next piece of public engagement, because it really is an important point of feedback from the public on these priorities. So it's a tall order to get it done, but I'm committed to get it done before May 1st. So
Thanks, Paul. Any questions or comments from NEDAP members? No. Okay. So the Center Street lots, I don't have a lot to add since the last meeting. We did meet and we got a initial presentation from the transportation Stantec, who's done all the work in Coolidge Corner, about parking and intersection impacts on intersections. And the bottom line is that there's not going to be a lot of parking on intersections. We spent almost the whole time talking about the left-hand turn from inbound Beacon onto Center Street as it exists now, which is it's supposed to, it's terrible all the time. And this isn't going to make that any worse or better, basically. The consultants we have another meeting next week or the week after, the week before Thanksgiving. And they're working on more traffic stuff and looking at some early financial cost implications of all of this stuff. There's nothing about that. And they're going to be doing a report that they'll finish before the end of the year, and they are going to be briefing the select board, I believe in January. Is that to see what the select board thinks. We talked last time here, I believe, about the chosen or the preferred alternative, which is the side lots one. But they're doing this analysis on the Grove, which is the redone. They're actually doing it on all of them because there were some people who really wanted to understand the impacts of the intent, the underground garage one. So we'll have a lot of that. And then the consultants are going to give us, as I understand it, kind of a roadmap of what we, if anybody wants to move forward with any of this stuff, what do we have to do? What does the town have to do? And we were assuming since the beginning that if anything happens there, it's gonna be a public-private partnership. The town doesn't have any money. We need to figure out what we need to do, what we want to expect from a developer, the whole thing, what, probably we do, or before we did a lot of work, we'd probably do a request for information. I don't know if I don't know we'll have these conversations early next year or during the course of next year. But again, it's not gonna happen anytime soon. It's a long process.
So, and this RFI comes before any overlay studies or any kind of analysis as to next steps for.
Well, that's a good question. We can, it's, I don't know the answer to that. We, not just this committee, but I think a larger group of people in town need to talk about that. We can spend a lot of time now figuring out all that stuff. Or we can just see whether anybody's interested, and then assuming that some people may be, do the work to make all those decisions before we send out an RFP for a specific kind of proposal. And it seems to me that just seeing if there's any interest out there, without a whole lot of conditions yet, may make some sense, but we haven't even had that conversation.
It's funny, it kind of echoes a little bit of the Chestnut Falls subcommittee. That after talking to brokers, the most important thing is to garner interest, in that interest knows that there's flexibility. That when they land here, you don't have to sit for 3 years wrestling with the town of Brookline to get something approved. That they can land, they know they got it. It's already all the zoning, all the overlays are done and done. I'm ready to roll. So I think it's just something just to keep in mind in perspective is like, the brokers said that people just won't come unless you guys are ready to roll. Right? They don't want to sit around for 2 years waiting for Brookline to make up their mind.
So you're suggesting not to do all the work now and just do an RFP?
Yeah, maximize all the zoning flexibility right now.
Well, like I said, this committee hasn't even talked about that. We need to figure that out. There's no, we're gonna have to get some lawyer involved and a variety of other.
Because now at Chestnut, right, we're kind of building the rocket ship as we go, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is town-owned land, so that's an advantage.
Right.
For starters.
Yeah.
But echoing what Mark has said, there's always interest in Brookline as a market. We know there's development interest in Brookline as a market. But a lot of developers won't come into this town because they consider it an onerous process to get to a project.
Right.
So the more you can do a priori before getting a developer, the better proposals you get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will triple echo what both these guys said. Done a lot of RFPs for complicated sites. Yeah, the sweet spot is to, not take away flexibility and zone ourselves into a straitjacket. The sweet spot is to, take a look at what we think we want, zone, an envelope that will accommodate that, or some other, flexible arrangement of the, same idea, on the site. Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. The common, what external things make development more difficult than they need to be. Cost of land, okay, town-owned land, doesn't mean the town necessarily wants to give it away. But if it wants the garage back, it will. Town-owned land and, getting entitlements, not project-specific entitlements, but getting zoning and getting, whatever the town has to go through, and people to take a deep breath and settle into the, getting that done up front is critical. I couldn't agree more. The other thing, which I've said a couple times before this, I think that in the most optimistic, forecast here, the ability of development on the site itself and on the west lot, and even if there's development on the fronting buildings and you somehow pull that in, I'd be shocked, we'd all be shocked if there were enough economics in that deal to, to pay for the garage. And my point in saying that isn't, so we shouldn't do it. We should do the road. My point is the exact opposite. We should, we should accept the fact, if everybody settles into the side lot or something like that. I like the side lot, as a preferred outcome. It's so important for economic development in Coolidge Corner. And it's so important for how, how transportation and parking is going to work in Coolidge Corner, forever. That, if getting it done requires a combination of, the town's ownership of the land, whatever can come out of the economics of a development deal, and looking for additional public funds to do it. That's what we ought to do.
Yeah. Well, that's, yeah, Ken.
Let me offer a contrasting opinion. I think this is alarming. I really do. I think this is, these are parking lots, and that's not a dirty word. Parking is an essential part of the transportation infrastructure in Brookline and in our commercial districts. The same as we accommodate mass transit, we accommodate pedestrian walkways, and we accommodate bike lanes. And you have to accommodate a certain level of cars. And I saw two phrases in the minutes that really alarmed me: a reference to an RFP, which sounds way premature, and the phrase possible phase construction to maintain parking during development. I think everyone here knows that a project of this scale would take at least 2.5 to 3 years to build. And the idea that you're not even essentially ensuring that the Coolidge Corner Theater, the bookstore, all the things we love about Brookline are going to have adequate parking for a 2.5 to 3 year period. I think that could be a real tipping point in the viability of those organizations. I don't think people sometimes appreciate, because it's in our backyard, how what a regional draw that the Coolidge Corner Theater is. It has 1,020 theater seats and 60 seats in the expanded educational wing. It just recently was one of 4 theaters in the world that hosted the premiere of the Paul Thomas Anderson VistaVision movie. So it is a huge driver, and that parking lot is right next to them. So I just think so many things we love about Brookline are going to be dependent on this parking being maintained. Now you can say the garage is going to replace it, and to that I would also ask the question: are we sure that the multifamily development that's built along with it is going to have adequate parking, so that doesn't really create a net reduction? So anyways, this concerns me a lot, and I look at this and the tipping point concept is: are we still losing 90 plus spaces with the T expansion? And we know we're losing 65 potentially along the Washington Street corridor. At some point, it's going to be very difficult, and this body has got to be the champion for promoting, maintaining, and expanding the commercial tax base. And I just think this has to be done extremely carefully.
Well, that's what we're talking about doing for the next however many months and years, probably, is getting that information, figuring all that out. And if we do an RFP, it would be at the end of that process. No one's talking about doing anything.
No, if you look at the minutes, it said RFP or request for information. So there was the idea that, and that's the way it's done sometimes, right? You put out RFPs and see who would do what. And but I think the possible phase construction, that phrase just jumped out at me. And maybe I'm getting on a soapbox here, but I just really feel that that's this important, critical issue.
Meredith.
So totally sensitive to all of those concerns. And I think, everything that Ann said, we did get a draft roadmap from SpecDMC about sort of where do we go from here, that we're going to be presenting at the November meeting. We're not going to have a November Center Street Lots meeting. I think the and the implementation roadmap that's going to be presented to the committee is also with the assumption that we're going to have all of the additional consulting resources available when we need them or when we're ready to move on to the next phase, which is not a given. So I think we're going to have to layer on top of that some practical considerations in terms of grant funding cycles and, contingency plans. So I do think that we're still quite a ways away out from the point of broaching the subject of moving forward with an RFP. And that the goal would be that you'd have some extensive RFI process and then probably the formation of another order committee that would have more expertise in real estate development and, have a familiarity with public-private partnerships to shepherd it through that next phase. So I just want to reassure you that we're not jumping into any RFP process anytime soon for a variety of reasons.
And yeah, go on.
Just to your point, I just wanted to confirm, are we at the close of this initial exploration?
So yeah, this is sort of the
Okay.
exploratory phase, and I think we launched it being very unsure if we would get to the point where there was clear consensus around one preferred option.
Gotcha.
So I think we've kind of arrived at this point maybe a bit sooner than we had anticipated.
Gotcha. Okay.
And whatever happens moving forward, whatever we all decide to do, if we're moving forward on any kind of project like this, we're gonna need a lot of input from everybody on this board. And a lot of help.
And I would say that it was reassuring to have David Lashinsky, David Gladstone, like a lot of the business community representatives participate in the Walkable City event and then had a lot of participation in sort of follow-ups and small business development committee discussions. And they seem comfortable at this point with sort of the concept that we're talking about. And I think that's due in large part to, the reassurance that we'll be replacing the parking. But I think your point, Ken, about if you're going to be replacing the public parking, but then adding additional uses that require parking, like, is that really a replacement, or are we going to end up cutting into that with the new demand for parking from residential or other commercial use there? So we're going to weigh all those variables.
Yeah, I think those would be the two, is the net number. Is it really in that, or is it really maintaining the capacity? And then the very real issue of losing major parking for an extended period of time.
Yeah, change is uncomfortable, no matter, like, if we're doing any kind of large project, I think is the truth between all of these different projects. So I think one of the things that I'm really hoping that the committee keeps in mind is just, I know that we were doing that wayfinding study around parking in Brookline. What happened with that? Is that still vibing, or
We did not get funding for the wayfinding planning, and I am following up with the state as to why. There was some whispers about some potential budget issues in terms of being able to cover the mass development initiative funding that goes to mass development that funds most of these projects. It's also one of the only funding opportunities that any municipality had for this last grant cycle. So it was highly competitive and also, I believe, slightly underfunded, but I'm still awaiting the full feedback from the state as to if it was something that we can improve upon for our grant application and or if it was a funding issue.
Yeah, because I think I'd just love to see that being a big part of any kind of large parking situation, because it's sort of like, a lot of our parking use studies show that we have underutilization in so many spaces that it just feels like, in this larger conversation of if things are happening, trying to like make sure that that's being intentional about the phasing.
Yeah, and we are looking to still seek out some funding, whether it's next one stop for growth funding or something else. Because it is one of the recommendations that came out of the Coolidge Corner parking study, and we're anticipating that it'll be the same thing for the Brookline Village and the Washington Square parking studies. And it is also something that the Washington Street Complete Streets folks are working on as well for that particular corridor. So we are still working slightly in tandem with them in terms of designs and things so we can implement it in the greater Brookline area. But so not done, just not now.
I would just add that the RFP should really be thought through in terms of what we're asking for. Because if we're not specific on parking, it's just an opportunity to build more residential. So I think, and I think we have to be realistic. Ken's point about parking replacement that's phased over time is a real challenge. And how do we find other areas where folks can park so that they don't lose their customer base? But it's also data driven with how many customers are driving, biking, et cetera. I mean, I think that data is all going to get collected, but I'd love for the RP to really look at reality and what we absolutely want. It'll be a lot easier to turn folks away than to have an open slate and start to get inbound proposals that don't match at all with what we want.
No, we have to be very clear about what we want. Yeah. That's why it'll take a while to get there. Anything else? So, Chestnut Hill.
All right. So I am very aware that this is the last agenda item, second to last agenda item of the evening, the day after daylight savings change. So I'm going to try to keep this as entertaining and brief as possible. So we are full steam ahead on finalizing our recommendations for Chestnut Hill. Just want to provide a little bit of a recap. I know that EDAP has been receiving updates throughout the course of the monthly meetings. I think towards the end of this year and early next year, we're gonna kind of get into more meatier updates with opportunities for feedback from EDAP. But just to remind everyone, we launched the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study, still sometimes referred to as Chestnut Hill West, but we don't call it that anymore. It's the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area. We launched the study in spring 2024 with the intention of developing a set of recommendations, thinking holistically about the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area, what opportunities exist there. So the original vision was set of recommendations would include rezoning recommendations, design guidelines that speak to that rezoning, infrastructure improvements, and various commercial area vibrancy enhancements. As we were launching that project in spring 2024 and doing the public engagement process, the Chestnut Hill Office Park, which is a 5-acre site, very important in terms of economic development and redevelopment opportunity for the town, changed hands. And City Realty, the new owner of the Chestnut Hill Office Park, became very involved in the study process and then ended up introducing their own redevelopment proposal for the Chestnut Hill Office Park. So we're sort of in parallel pursuing our study recommendations for the entire study area that are, and in parallel considering the redevelopment proposal from City Realty. And these two processes working in parallel are informing one another. So I just wanted to, we're kind of experimenting with the new format and then kind of got pulled into our previous format of a developer comes with an idea and then we spent a lot of time reviewing their consideration and crafting zoning recommendations in response to that. So we're doing these two things at the same time, just to remind everyone. So in addition to the original recommendations that we set out to develop, we are also considering town protections in the form of memorandum of agreement, which would include a tax certainty agreement with City Realty as well. So this is a kind of rough indication of where we're at in terms of progress towards completing each recommendation and then each deliverable. So I'd say we're about halfway through developing the zoning. Design guidelines are in progress. We're working with Sasaki on sort of creating a more visual set of recommendations. We'd originally set out with the intention to do update sort of the multi-page Word document, but felt it was important for this project and maybe just in the future going forward for all these types of rezoning efforts to have really visual design guidelines. And I do think that the design guidelines work is going to escalate pretty quickly and get pretty far by the end of this month. So the December meeting, I'm hoping to have some updates for the design guidelines and the vision for at least 3 of the 4 proposed sub-districts in the study area. We're we're almost 2/3 of the way through the transportation work. We did a comprehensive existing conditions analysis over the summer, wrapped that work up. And now we're working with our consultant Kittleson and Associates to develop some recommendations for intersection improvements as well as bike and pedestrian network. That's going to enhance, the safety and level of comfort for multimodal transportation at the site. And then, variety of pretty straightforward commercial area vibrancy enhancements, like, wayfinding, streetscape beautification, things like that. We need to roll all of this up into one report about the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study recommendations. We're also working on an MOA with City Realty. And once we have all the pieces in place, we can fold that into the zoning warrant articles, which will include the zoning amendments warrant article, as well as authorizing the select board to enter into a memorandum of agreement, as well as a tax certainty agreement on behalf of the town. So the EDAB subcommittee's work, the subcommittee reconvened a few weeks ago, and I think everyone's familiar with the work of the subcommittee, but this is just a summary of since the subcommittee was established just about a year ago. A lot of the initial work was on doing an analysis of the financial feasibility of redeveloping the Chestnut Hill Office Park site at the existing 2.5 FAR and assuming an expansion of the allowed uses. And there was the conclusion that it was not financially feasible, which I think was an assumption that we all had. But it was just very helpful to have that analysis and concrete conclusion as a point of reference so we can sort of push through that 2.5 FAR when we are talking about what would be an appropriate level of density to land on for different sub-districts in the area. After the recommendations that EDAB reviewed and approved about the financial feasibility of the existing FAR, there were a couple of additional meetings in the spring to explore some of the EDAB subcommittee. There were a lot of things that were discussed in the context of, doing the analysis of the financial feasibility work in January, and there were some additional policy considerations in April and May. So all of that feedback back and forth with the subcommittee earlier this year really informed the drafting of the zoning that staff was able to get to work on over the summer. So a lot of this is really baked into the current components and where the draft zoning stands. So the subcommittee reconvened a few weeks ago. Staff provided an update about, what had been going on since the subcommittee last convened in May, and then sought some guidance on a couple of very specific policy issues in the draft zoning. So I will go into where we landed on that, and then I welcome the subcommittee members to jump in and interrupt me with any additional comments. So just to refresh, this is the existing zoning in Chestnut Hill. We are not changing the base zoning. We are proposing an overlay district with these 4 sub-districts. 2 of the 4 are very much focused on it. So all of these are anticipated as mixed use. The orange and kind of the reddish color are very commercial forward in terms of the incentives that we're trying to build into the zoning there.
Where does the City Realty's land start and stop exactly?
Yep, it's the
Tully Street all the way over?
The Chestnut Hill Office Park is this area here. So Tully to,
Parking lot next to Tully is Grove Properties.
Okay.
yeah.
So after the parking lot all the way down, okay.
So this is the Newton border, Tully Street, and then Chestnut Hill Office Park is everything except for this strip right here.
Yep, okay.
All right, so the Chestnut Hill commercial, in terms of where we're at with the zoning, I think given the significance of the Chestnut Hill Office Park in terms of its redevelopment potential and its like high impact for economic development contributions, the 4.0 sub-district is the most fully fleshed out at this point within the zoning. And so where things currently stand for the Chestnut Hill 4.0 is max FAR 4.0, 4.5 with a bonus, height 150 feet, which is about 12 stories, or 175 feet at about 14 stories with the bonus. And then there's this Senate, smaller scale 3.0 area, which was one of the recommendations that emerged from the EDAB subcommittee to capitalize on the frontage on Boylston Street and really, make sure that this has an appropriate amount of commercial included. So max FAR of 3, maximum bonus of 3.5, height of 125 feet, about 10 stories with 150 feet and 12 stories with a bonus. And the way to access the bonus is through the amount of commercial that is included in the redevelopment proposal. So I think a big issue that we've been grappling with in the direction that we want to take with the rezoning and what we want to incentivize is, one of the leading study objectives is to incentivize net new commercial tax growth. And I think we've also had to confront the town's limitations in terms of the commercial market potential. So we did the market study early on. I don't think the results of that, which was presented to EDAB, and I don't think the results of that was particularly surprising. So it's like hotel, medical office, maybe some office, and if lab was still a thing, maybe lab, but there's not much chance of that in the near future. And we know, to Zaina's point, that, developers really want to do the residential here. So what is the appropriate balance of making sure that we're trying to get as much commercial potential while still tethered to the realities of the market? And, being accommodating enough to know, developers can build the residential that they want. So in order to access the overlay district, minimum of 51% of the gross floor area has to be for commercial uses. If the amount of commercial use exceeds 60% of the gross floor area, then that's how you access the bonus height and density. And then we also have this concept of rollover commercial square footage, where if it's a phased redevelopment and you exceed the 51% threshold, you can, instead of utilizing the bonus, you could roll that over to a subsequent phase, that might be more residential. So the policy pieces that we were looking for the subcommittee's feedback on were related to how we are calculating the minimum commercial requirement, and what levers we can kind of pull within that formula to try to incentivize certain types of uses that we find more desirable. And then we also had a question about, how to try to protect the town as much as possible to make sure that we realize the full amount of the commercial that developers are proposing. So for the minimum commercial requirement, on the right, this is kind of the most recent version based on the subcommittee's input. So it's the effective commercial gross floor area. The multipliers on the right-hand side are applied to the uses in the left-hand column. So these uses are primarily picked out and prioritized because of their tax generation potential. So hotel, lab, clearly very strong in terms of tax generation potential. Small scale retail is included in there as an acknowledgement of a really important community priority. People want to have more small independent businesses more aligned with the direct neighborhood needs, in stark contrast to sort of like the high-end luxury options that are over at the street. So we realize that for first generation space, this is not probably going to be a mom and pop shop, but over time, we think that, the size that we're defining as the small scale retail could eventually lend itself to that. And then the next tier in terms of the weight would be medical office and retail. So the commercial uses in the numerator, you'd apply the multipliers and then divide by the total gross floor area to get your effective commercial area. So the original is where things were at based on where we landed with our draft in September, and then the updated is based on the subcommittee input. And then the second important policy point that we got good recommendations and guidance from the subcommittee regarding is phasing requirements tied to the minimum commercial requirement. We are very concerned that there's the potential for a developer to access the additional density through the overlay and, through a phase redevelopment, just like not follow through and realize the commercial that we were expecting and sort of exchanging the height and density for. So the feedback that we got from subcommittee was, in the situation where you have phase redevelopment, the first building that goes up, you can't get the certificate of occupancy until you have demonstrated financing and broken ground on the subsequent building or buildings that have the commercial uses needed to meet the minimum commercial requirement. So we're kind of holding the certificate of occupancy hostage until they follow through or look like they're sincerely going to follow through on the commercial minimum. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And just to give an example of this, we can reference City Realty's most recent iteration. which includes just to orient everyone. So it's 3 buildings. You have 14-story condo and hotel. So there's a combination of ground floor and underground parking, retail parking on the ground floor, hotel, and then luxury condos on top. That's building A. That would be the first phase of development. And then there's buildings B, which is a 12-story medical office building with some parking and retail at the ground floor, and building C, which is a 7-story residential building with parking underground at the ground floor. And then just the site plan view for reference. Oops, nope. Okay. So this also has the site circulation plan, which is a single lane of circulation running through the interior of the site. They're going to be utilizing the existing curb cuts off of Boylston Street as best they can. So you see building A and building B have ground floor retail that looks out into sort of this open space or courtyard area. And then the residential building, and this is going to be tree canopy and helping to meet the open space requirements. Okay, so aerial view. And then Heath Street view. Another key difference from the 3 earlier iterations is that they changed the orientation of the buildings. So previously they'd sort of run parallel to Heath Street and Boylston, and then they shifted the orientation so it's more north-south and kind of perpendicular. And I think the general sense is that this has been very effective in helping to break down the sense of the massing and the density. So this works. But we are still, so that being said, we were developing the zoning and then City Realty presented their iteration in response to it. So we're not 100% aligned in terms of what the town had stated as the zoning requirements and what City Realty is talking about. So we're still working through some proposed step backs and a proposed sky plane from the Heath Street side. And there has been a lot of discussion at the community advisory group meetings recently about being more thoughtful about the orientation on the Boylston Street side, which I think up until this point, we've been very focused on sort of the impacts from more the neighborhood perspective in the Heath Street side. So this is too many numbers. So you don't have to think too deeply about this, but you can come back to this slide if you were curious about the evolution of City Realty's proposal. I would call everyone's attention to the last 2 lines here about the estimates and fiscal impact and estimated net new commercial tax growth. So the fiscal impact is the anticipated tax generation from the redevelopment proposal minus the anticipated municipal service costs. And then the bottom line is the net new commercial tax growth is minus a little over $1 million that the site is currently generating for the town. So the most recent proposal, estimated total fiscal impact, 6.7 million, and estimated net new impact is 5.6 million. And I thought just for a point of comparison, it might be helpful to show sort of EDAB scorecard in terms of the annual tax revenue contributions from various EDAB sponsored redevelopment projects. So the number, so the FY25, the property tax is in blue and rooms tax is in orange. So the orange number is still a little squishy because those numbers haven't been finalized yet, but the blue number is a solid number. So for FY25, EDAB sponsored commercial tax revenue contribution was just about 6.8 million. And then here is just the list of the individual properties and their annual tax yield contributions. So at the top, you have 2 Brookline Place at about 1.7 million, followed by all the hotels, Courtyard Marriott, Hilton Garden Inn, Homewood Suites, and AC Hotel. At office building at 1010 Com Ave by the BU campus, and 10 Brookline Place generates a lot more tax revenue than that. So that 365,000 is a 15% of, I think they did an addition at some point over the past 10 or 15 years. So it's a small piece of the total Brookline Place tax contribution. And then Kendall Crescent followed by Goddard House and Assisted Living. So that was, so to be continued, more information. I'm looking forward to presenting some of the Sasaki work to you at the December meeting. The EDAB subcommittee is planning to meet on Friday to prepare for sort of a Q&A discussion with the community advisory group. The height and density remain, really top concerns from the neighbors. So there's, there've been some requests to bring the EDAB subcommittee in to help maybe address some of the concerns and explain, why the current level of density is justified or appropriate.
Meredith, you might want to just remind people that the AC Hotel is only partly in Brookline.
The AC Hotel is only part of it's on the Boston.
Yeah,
Boston
so
line.
it's a, cuts through the line, cuts through, so we only get some of the room tax and property tax.
But that's our share that's represented there.
It's
And is the goal that our visions will converge with the city realty before the deadline in February, that February?
yeah, hopefully sooner.
They're
I
gonna
think-
have to, right?
Yeah, I think with the design guidelines work, there was the assumption there'd be a little push and pull as we're finalizing the design guidelines and maybe making some modifications to the zoning to reflect wherever we landed with the Sasaki work. But the template that we're using for the design guidelines is choosing a sub-district, building that out, and then using that as the template across the rest of the study area and the 3 other sub-districts. And we're starting with 4.0. So the hope is that, by the end of November, we're gonna have some alignment and agreement with City Realty.
And also, wasn't there a minimum lot size that would have to adhere to the 51%?
Yes, so we have that at half an acre right now.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that was driven by accommodations for the Tully Street lot.
Right, so we can talk more Friday, but that's sort of like a 20,000 square foot footprint, so 10,000 would be really intensive, make it small, but.
Yeah.
So taking this conversation to the 10,000 foot level, generally, there's been a movement on both sides toward a consensus. And I think it's actually Meredith has been really effective in helping sort of bring folks together. The developers obviously need what they need to get viable development going. The town obviously has its concerns and the neighbors, obviously their concerns. But I think actually it's been a very sort of iterative, cooperative process, moving the way we felt it should. And I think we're arriving at a development that is really, really gone much better in terms of its financeability and could actually be developed. I think some of the initial proposals were a little pie in the sky. The way they divvied it up into 3 discrete buildings with 3 programs that sound financeable really resonates with our subcommittee.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good process, because you don't get that often.
It's great to hear.
Yeah.
Any questions, everybody? Nothing? Oh,
Well, it's a big thumbs up for everybody.
thank you. That was great. And look forward to hearing more. Okay. Is that it? We're early. People can have more food. Did you have something, Jessica?
The only thing for the other business is I will include this in our December 1st meeting agenda packet, but I did put together a 2026 EDAB meeting schedule, which we would normally have done in October, but since we were early in September, I didn't have the full holiday calendar list for town hall closures, but it will still be our first Monday of the month. The only 3 months that are impacted, similar to last year, is July 4th weekend would be our usual meeting, so we'll bump that out to the 13th. Labor Day is on the 7th, which would have been our meeting, so we'll bump that out by a week. And finally, Hanukkah is within the window of our usual December 7th meeting, so we'll bump that up to the 14th. So, but otherwise, our standard first Monday of the month, and I will include that in the packet for next month, but we do have that ready and available, and I'll be sending out the official calendar invitations later this week.
That's not an issue. Is it the first night of Hanukkah?
No, it's in the middle. It ends on the 12th. So,
We should check with anybody and see if that's an issue. I think
Okay.
it probably is not.
Right.
It's, our regular meeting in December would be in the middle of them. Because you have reason to change. No, that's okay. Yeah. I
it's
think
December
that's-
4th to the 12th is.
I think it's probably
timeframe.
okay, but
Okay.
let me.
It's also a problem with the Jewish calendar expert is death.
I think it's a requirement to be.
Middle of Seneca's fine.
Yeah, I think the middle. of it is-
Okay, okay, no, we'll find that.
Good. Anything else? So Aaron, why are you sitting on a throne over there? I just noticed. Your chair's different from all the others.
I don't know, but I'll take it. Final day privileges.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you brought it in on purpose. Anyway, I just want to thank you, for those of you, I mean, I've worked closely with Aaron and it's been a real pleasure. And he is so well liked and appreciated by everybody in the business community here. And is going to be missed. The chamber had a little event last Thursday, anyway, at Bar Lunette, which is you haven't been there, it's mobbed all the time. To wish Aaron well, and I don't know if you brought your little, they gave him a little turkey thing to put on his desk to get a new job.
I bet they should give you one of the full size ones.
It was very much appreciated.
And anyway, really, at least I really appreciate the work you've done and we'll miss you. And,
Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Apparently we have extra.
All right, good job.
And there's more food here for anybody who wants it. And does everybody know what Aaron's gonna be doing?
Yeah, do tell.
Coaching.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Coaching
What
football.
are we doing?
We're saying that because Auburn's looking for a football coach. It wouldn't be a bad gig because if I did get fired from that gig, I'd get at least what, a $15 million payout. I'll take that any day. So I've accepted the position of Director of Economic Development and Planning back in Alabama for the city of Anniston. It's in East Alabama between Birmingham and Atlanta. It's a really pretty area of the state. It's at the foothills of the Appalachians. The previous director was there for over 20 years, so he's retiring. It was a really good opportunity that kind of honestly just kind of landed in my lap. And if you didn't know, I'm originally from Alabama. So,
We thought you were from New England.
yeah, South New England. But yeah, it's going to be a really good opportunity to get me and my fiance back closer to our families. She'll get to get back into horses like she's always been talking about doing. So if you're ever in the area, there's no need to be a stranger. I would love to show you around. And I will, of course, be making some trips back up here because somebody's got to check on the turkeys. So, but I really don't want any of you to be a stranger. I've definitely appreciated all the warm, from the minute I got here, it was a very warm welcome. You've accepted me in. I thought we've had a lot of good, productive working relationships across the board. A lot of these projects, they would not have been as successful as they were without your feedback and your guidance on a lot of this stuff. So I appreciate you all making my job easy. But I am going to miss, like I said, a really good working relationship. So thank all of you.
Good luck.
Appreciate it.
Good luck. Thank you.
Is that gonna be our new sister city?
It could be.
Aniston. How many people are in Aniston? What's the population?
Around 20,000, just over 20,000.
Yeah.
Alabama's first planned city. So,
How old is it? When was it planned?
oh, now you're asking me the trivia question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But like I said, it's got a lot of good stuff going for it. Had a big army base nearby that closed, and so there's a lot of housing opportunities out that way. It's got several industrial parks, and that's one of the things I am excited about doing. Before I came up here, I did a lot of business recruitment and retention with industrial sites, and some of the big corporations and companies. So that'll be fun to try to recruit all that stuff again. So, yeah. I've already told
Send
Meredith.
some of that land our way, that'd be greatly appreciated.
We'll buy it.
Yeah.
In Brooklyn.
They just don't make land like they used to, do they?
That's what have you told the mayor?
You know, what's that?
You said you already told the mayor something?
Well, no, I said, they just don't make land like they used to.
Okay, anything else?
To adjourn?
We can move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.